today. We're very excited to be here with you at the Compassionate Action Conference to discuss compassionate engagement with men and boys for gender equality. My name is Madeline Nielsen, and I'm the Program Officer, Capacity Development and Mentoring with the Fund for Innovation and Transformation, also known as FIT. So I'll just take our slides down momentarily. So I just want to start off by acknowledging that the Manitoba Council for International Cooperation and FIT are situated on Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. And since our team is all across Turtle Island, also known as Canada, I'm personally joining the call from Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. As we are all joining from around the world, we encourage you to reflect and learn more about the land that you live on using the link in the chat that my colleague will add. And during today's event, we will be learning from organizations who will share their experiences with men and boys engagement in short-term testing projects with the goal of advancing gender equality. To start off, we'll provide some information about the FIT program. And if you would like to ask a question to our presenters, we would love to hear from you. So we will have some time dedicated for this at the end of the session. So we invite you at any point during this session to please type your questions in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can. Before we introduce our panelists today, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the FIT program for those of you who are not familiar with us. FIT is a Canadian innovation program funded by Global Affairs Canada and developed to support small and medium-sized organizations and their partners in the Global South who are testing innovative solutions that aim to advance gender equality and empower women, girls, and vulnerable communities. The organizations that we support represent civil society, post-secondary institutions, private sector, and social enterprises. Testing projects are short and occur between 6 and 15 months. We have seen some really incredible results so far, representing a variety of contexts and innovative approaches. While our program speaks mostly about innovative development, it is very much grounded in care and compassion, which is why we're here today talking about this at the Compassionate Action Conference. One of the key elements of the FIT program is the creation of spaces for organizations to share their results and learnings with others interested in innovation work to foster a culture of collaboration. In the spirit of sharing, we are very pleased to profile 2 FIT projects who tested approaches to challenge gender norms and prevent gender-based violence. So, joining us today, you will see on screen, are Danielle Scogan from Asociación Ser Niña and Vureyayi or Ray Fugeni from SCORE Against Poverty. Danielle is representing Asociación Ser Niña. Ser Niña and their Canadian partner, Real Humanitarian, tested the impact and effectiveness of a holistic violence prevention and response program in Guatemala to reduce rates of sexual and domestic violence and improve recovery for survivors. Ray is representing SCORE Against Poverty, who, with their Canadian partner, St. Mary's Road United Church, tested a community-designed program to redefine masculinity in a positive way at the family level in Zimbabwe. This included their Men Can Cook competition, a skills-based learning opportunity for men taught by women. And you can read Danielle and Ray's full bios on the Compassionate Action Conference website, and of course you can connect with them on the conference platform. So a big warm welcome to you both, Danielle and Ray.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Madeline.
Nice to see you both today. So I know a bit about your projects myself, but I'm really excited to learn more about your incredible gender equality work during this session with our audience today. So let's start off with a bit of an overview of your testing projects. So my first question for both of you is, what was your innovative solution to advance gender equality, and what actually sparked the idea for it? Help us understand the context in which you were working. So Danielle, I'll actually start with you for this one.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm really honored to be here and sharing with everyone. So thanks for the opportunity. For Serenina, and with support of our Canadian partner, Real Humanitarian, our FIT testing project really aimed to test the impact and effectiveness of a more holistic, family centered approach to addressing gender based violence and responding to gender based violence cases in Guatemala. Our three main targets were to advance the empowerment of girls and women, to advance gender equity, and the predominant goal was to decrease rates of gender based violence within the target community. So, a bit of background: Cerninia has been running gender equity and girl empowerment programs in Guatemala since 2015. And for in 2018, we did already begin engaging boys in the program as well, really recognizing that we could only get so far when we were only working with the girls themselves. However, as we dug deeper into the issues and connected more with the local communities, we really recognized the need to potentially engage whole families. The hard truth is that the vast majority of cases of gender based violence are happening within the home. So, though we are seeing great impact in our workshops and that the girls were able to apply in their own lives, it was hard to see true empowerment and true change when they would go back to homes that were maybe not supportive of the messages we were teaching or were putting their lives and well being at risk. So, we came up with a model that really sought to expand our program beyond working with just girls and really engaging whole families. And through the support of FIT, we were able to test this more innovative approach. As FIT really does focus on innovation, there are a number of different aspects of this new program that truly were innovative. First and foremost, it was the engagement of whole families, really moving beyond the idea that the only way to advance the empowerment of girls and women is to work with them exclusively, and really engage everyone that make up their community to see real and lasting change. We also sought to have a truly holistic approach. Historically, Sardinia had really focused on running workshops, and we had seen the need for more customized and deeper approaches. So through FIT, we were also able to offer therapy sessions, whether that be individual, group, couple, or family therapy sessions. We also increased our capacity building sessions for community leaders and educators to engage them in the conversations and work as well, and also do community driven response initiatives that were gender informed and gender transformative at heart. And really just kind of pushing back on that one track approach to different initiatives. It was also innovative because it really did focus on both healing and empowerment, and not just kind of diving right into the leadership initiatives, but really working on healing past trauma as well. And the incorporation specifically of Mayan healing modalities, and working with Mayan leaders as we were working in a Mayan community. And most importantly, really taking a restorative justice and compassionate approach, which we saw as pivotal, not only in the work for gender based violence, but truly when it comes to engaging boys and men. We ran the program in a small indigenous community called El Hato in Guatemala that's made up of roughly 1,800 people. We worked with 30 families, reaching over 200 people every single week. The program ran for 12 months from 2021 till 2022. And as I said, was comprised of weekly workshops, therapy sessions, and community initiatives. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Danielle. I really appreciated hearing about how comprehensive your approach was, and we'll get into the details a little bit later. For now, Ray, I'd like to pass it to you. Can you share more about the innovation that you tested and what sparked the idea for it?
Thank you so much. First of all, let me acknowledge FIT for supporting this initiative. Our innovative solution is called the Men Can Cook competition. I think cooking is a big issue, and it's a global, it's something that people are talking about globally. Cooking is very important. Why did we come up with this Men Can Cook competition? We actually designed it to challenge and transform harmful gender norms in Menezi district of Zimbabwe. The innovation lay in its bold shift from conventional gender equality programming. So rather than focusing exclusively on empowering women and girls, we placed men and boys at the center of the solution, making them active agents of change in dismantling the very norms that disadvantages women and girls. The idea was sparked by a deep understanding of our cultural context, where gender roles are deeply entrenched and traditional approaches often provoke resistance from men, sometimes resulting in backlash against women and girls. We realized that a different culturally grounded approach was needed, one that invited men into the conversation, not as perpetrators, but as partners. By scanning our cultural worldview, we identified values and practices that could be harnessed to promote positive masculinity. Our innovation was to affirm men's social roles while simultaneously reshaping them, recognizing their potential to lead transformative change in a way that preserves dignity and fosters collaboration. SCORE as an organization had to reimagine its own approaches too. We embraced the belief that men and boys could be champions of gender equity, and we committed to working alongside them. Women and girls were not sidelined. They played pivotal roles as facilitators and co-creators of training content, ensuring that the curriculum reflected their lived experiences and priorities. Key issues identified by women included the disproportionate burden of unpaid household labor, especially cooking, and the lack of safe, inclusive spaces for dialogue. Our approach created separate reflection spaces for men and women, while also bringing them together in mixed group discussions to bridge perspectives and co-create solutions. This inclusive dialogue process proved to be very highly effective. Ultimately, the innovation was not just in the activities we implemented, but in the mindset shift. We redefined the gender equity journey as one of collective transformation grounded in cultural intelligence, mutual respect, and shared leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray. It sounds like there's certainly some similarities between the two of your innovations, and I really appreciated the locally driven aspect of your innovative solution and how the community came up with that together. So thank you for sharing. Now let's dive a bit deeper into your testing projects. I'd love to know, what are some of the specific gender inequalities that you addressed in your testing? You both mentioned a few of them, but specifically I'm wondering, what strategies did you use to address these gender sensitive issues in the local context, especially with your work with men and boys? And how does compassion play a role in this? So Danielle, I'll start with you to take this question on again.
Thanks, Madeline. So yes, we were trying to take a holistic approach to advancing gender equity within the population we served, but the main focus was reducing rates of gender-based violence. That was the key target that we were aiming for. So Guatemala continues to be one of the most gender unequal countries in the world. It ranks 119th out of 189 countries worldwide on the Gender Inequality Index. We see extremely high rates of gender-based violence. Guatemala ranks third worldwide for rates of femicide, and a woman in Guatemala is murdered by their partner every 12 hours, and over 5 women are reported missing every single day. Sexual violence and gender-based violence can also lead to extremely high rates of child and adolescent pregnancy. For example, in Guatemala, a child or teen girl becomes pregnant every 5 minutes of every single day. So those are really kind of the national level stats that we're trying to address. And those, unfortunately, harsh realities were reflected within the specific community that we were working in. When we were doing initial kind of community assessments and data collection for El Hato, it was found that over 36% of pregnancies happening in this village were happening to teen girls, and nearly 60% of individuals surveyed reported currently experiencing some form of violence, and that was highest among girls and women, where over 66% of individuals said they were currently facing frequent violence of some form. So we really wanted to, as I said, take a holistic approach to addressing some of these gender issues. And we really wanted to get to the root of the problem, not just kind of jump in at the surface with a workshop or two. And so that really meant doing a lot more deeper healing and self exploratory work before jumping into more of the, violence prevention pieces. So we really did take a healing approach, whether that was in our group workshops. The initial workshops were originally just very much more focused on self knowledge, self discovery, self care, and healing past trauma. As I said, it was not just in workshops, but it was also explored with the support of highly trained local therapists and healers as well. So that was one of the kind of key aspects, is really starting from a place of healing before we dive into some of the other concepts, and really just engaging whole families. So what we found is that obviously working with boys and men did not only allow them to engage a bit more, but it also, we found, opened the door much more for the girls and women's participation. We've been running programs similar to this for 10 years, but we struggled sometimes to fully get girls and women to engage because there was this fear or this feeling that they had to have the permission of their husbands, or that they were too scared to tell their husbands that they were participating in these types of programs. So by fully engaging whole families and including the men and husbands in the conversation, not only increased their engagement, but really we felt drastically increased, improved, and sped up the engagement and transformation within the women and girls themselves. Another really important thing is just to be meeting them where they're at, and to really understand what each specific group's motivations and challenges are. I think we need to give up on the idea that, everyone will engage in these types of programs just because it's the right thing to do. They need to really understand what's in it for them personally. I think that is a hard truth about society sometimes. So that was specifically true with the men. When we first tried launching the program, it was just, this is a family support program to prevent gender-based violence, and engagement was extremely low for the men. But once we were able to start working with the men and really working with them to understand how this type of program or this type of inner work with themselves could not only benefit their families and their wives' lives, but their own as well, how they could potentially increase their family income by having more empowered and safer wives and children, how they could advance their family by sending their daughters to school. That was a really big game changer for us, by really understanding the very unique motivators for each group, and they will be different. So that was a really big shift as well. And most importantly, really having, as I said, restorative justice was a key component of our approach, and really taking a compassionate approach to that. So I think a lot of times when we launch these types of programs, men can feel extremely targeted and attacked, and then they'll just shut down right away, and engagement will completely shut down. So really approaching the program with compassion, recognizing that many of the men that we were working with had been are survivors of violence as well, have lived through deep trauma, and also holding space for them to kind of share their experiences, share their challenges, and know that, we're not trying to approach them as the enemy, but really, exactly as Ray said, as partners in kind of moving the needle forward together. So really, that compassion piece, I think, was really critical for actually getting the boys and men to engage.
I love that. Thank you, Danielle. Holding space for them to share their own experiences, I think, is really important in gender work. So I like that you said that, for sure. And Ray, I'll pass this same question to you. I know as well you were a local project partner living and working in Zimbabwe. So when you're answering this question about the gender issues in the local context, especially working with men and boys, I'm curious to know, how does local knowledge about gender dynamics and your collaboration with local communities inform the approaches that you took when you were working with men and boys compassionately?
Thank you so much. I think I would be touching into that as I talk about the gender inequalities that we were addressing through our Men Can Cook initiative. So actually what we did was we set out to tackle some of the most deeply rooted and most resisted gender inequalities in the area. So we knew from the start that if we were going to make lasting change, we couldn't focus just on symptoms. We had to go deep into the roots. and knowing the cultural context was important. So we began by asking bold cultural-centered questions, such as, what does it mean to be a man in the Shona culture? What does it mean to be a woman in this culture? Because gender inequality is not just about who does what at home. It is about the very ideas that shape our roles and identities and our expectations from birth. From there, we unpacked traditional gender norms in my village. We asked, which ones are harmful? Which ones carry potential for good? Normally, traditional wisdom, indigenous knowledge is looked at, is frowned upon. But in this case, we were more curious to understand which ones can actually have potential for good. And crucially, we created safe space for boys to enter into this conversation together with men, not as problems to be solved, but as partners, leaders, and contributors to change. So at the heart of our work was the unequal distribution of unpaid care and domestic work, which women had already identified. I want people to know that in our communities, cooking, cleaning, childcare have long been seen as the sole responsibility of women and girls, regardless of their workload, education, or aspiration. This isn't just unfair, it's limiting. It traps women in cycles of servitude and blocks their opportunities to thrive and do better in their life. So we tackled this directly by using cooking as both a symbol and a strategy. Not just because food matters, but because in our culture, cooking means something more. In some cases, men marry so they can have someone to cook for them. A woman's value is often tied to a presence in the kitchen. So when men learned to cook, not as a performance, but as a genuine act of love, care, and shared responsibility, it disrupted more than a stereotype. It challenged the very assumption that fuel early marriages. It challenged the assumptions that fuel domestic violence and gendered power dynamics in the home. But we didn't stop there with this innovation. We also tackled an often overlooked inequality, the idea that men lack empathy. Many traditional gender programs treat men as inherently unfeeling or resistant. But our lived experience in our communities told a different story. In consultations, we met men who cared deeply, but were afraid of being laughed at, afraid of being ostracized, or seen as weak by their peers for doing what is considered women's work. So we created safe spaces, not just for learning, but for lamenting, for men to process that fear, to support one another, to break the silence and find strength in vulnerability. And women were right there too, co-designing training content, shaping the agenda, ensuring that conversations reflected their priorities. We also addressed another persistent inequality, the limited voice and influence of women in shaping community norms and decision-making. In the Men Can Cook competitions, women were not passive beneficiaries. They were facilitators. They were creators of content. They were leaders. They were trainers, helping define what success looked like and guiding the journey to get there. This shifted not just perceptions, but power. And perhaps most importantly, we tore down the walls that often separate men and women in gender conversations. We moved from silos to shared spaces. Yes, we held gender-specific dialogues, but we always circled back to inclusivity, joint discussions. Because true transformation doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when everyone has a voice and when empathy flows both ways. So through this Men Can Cook innovation, you can clearly see that culture is moving alongside everything that we are doing, not as an enemy, but also as an enabler. So more often in our gender work, culture is seen as a bad thing. But in this project, we were very curious to see which aspects can be taken in and which aspects can be reshaped or redefined. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was, wow, that was amazing to learn more about your work. And something you said really struck me. You said men's programming and men's engagement in gender equality is an act of love, care, and shared responsibility, which I think really hits the theme of this Compassionate Action Conference, engaging compassionately on gender issues with everybody involved, as you've both done. So my next question is just to dig a bit more into your men and boys engagement strategies that you applied during your programming. So in alignment with Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, men and boys engagement has been critical to address gender issues in both of your projects, as you were sharing. I'm wondering if you can share more about how men and boys engagement has impacted your gender work. And I'd like to start with Ray for this one, because I'd like you to share a little bit about your own identity as a man and how your own gender identity has influenced Score Against Poverty's men's programming. Sorry, you're on mute, Ray. I can't hear you yet. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much for that question. Growing up in my village as a young man, we had lost his father. I watched how my mother struggled to look after us. She had to do everything by herself with no help. And being the firstborn myself, I had to quickly come up and learn how to do some of the work and help my siblings as well. One of the things that really encouraged me to really work in this area of gender equity and gender justice is the fact that I saw firsthand how it was so easy for my mother to lose all the assets. It was not a lot of things. My father didn't have a good job. It was just very small things like pots, plates, cups. How it was so easy for her to lose all these things just because of the fact that she was a woman. When my father died, my uncles had the say over who gets what of my father's inheritance. And that was disturbing. I was very young, yet I watched my mother do everything from scratch, from cooking, from trying to find firewood, water, and everything. It was also very painful to see how culture did not give her a chance. In fact, as a son and a first child, I had more power than my mother. Yet I was only 14 years old. I would be invited to discuss family issues, and my mother would be left out because she's a woman. I would be invited for making decisions about what to do with, perhaps even in a village, I would be invited to talk about what the community can do, and I would give I had a voice and an opinion. But all the women in the village who were older and wiser than me would not have a chance. So this actually shaped the way I started thinking about gender and how it can be transformative. Worse still, I also witnessed firsthand how women suffered the breath of men who would beat them up for not cooking, for not doing household chores, and how my my siblings, were not even prioritized. I have two sisters. When I went to my uncle to ask for school fees, usually the answer was, we can probably pay for you, but not for your sisters, because they are going to be married. They are going to be cooks. They will go and work in the kitchen and get married. So all this really kind of helped me have a completely different worldview in terms of how we relate to each other. And I'm also grateful that it is not just because of the fact that my experience could only shape this, but I was also able to come across good allies and good people that could really nurture the way I was thinking about culture and how we can use culture as a tool to perhaps, transform gender inequalities in my community. And one of those allies are, of course, Fund for Innovation and Transformation. So growing up, I watched this firsthand. We lost everything. My mother worked from scratch after my father died. She had no voice. I had to step up and speak on her behalf as the first child. My sisters had no voice. So the best thing to do was to start an organization that would champion and try to at least work on behalf of and together with women and girls, and an organization that could bring men on board so that they can be allies and so that they can also use their power and they can also use their influence to help the society learn that men, women, boys, and girls are all created equally and they can all have the same space and can all do the same job that each one of them could decide to do without any hindrance. I'm so pleased to report that through this work in our villages, if you come today, you would see that there's genuine love and there's genuine fellowship and understanding between people as they work together, contribute to their society, and see the change that I really wish I always say I wish my father was alive to see what is happening now in the village as a result of the good work that came out of this story that is painful, but actually gave birth to a very exciting development in the community.
Thank you so much for sharing that very personal story, but very meaningful story. And thank you as well for just being an ally for women and girls. As a man, we appreciate it. The women in your community, I'm sure, appreciate it. And I think more men could learn from you, Ray. So that's great. Danielle, I'll pass this question to you as well. I'd love to hear more about how your men and boys engagement work with Serenina has influenced your current programming. If you could speak a little bit to that and how it's impacted your work.
Absolutely. I personally just want to sit here and listen to Ray keep talking. I was very immersed in what he was saying. But definitely. So when we started really doing the most meaningful work possible as we could with the men and boys that we launched with the FIT initiative, we absolutely saw quicker changes. As I said, we'd been doing similar work, but just not as closely working with men for almost 10 years. And we had never seen the speed of the changes just because again, the hard truth is that when it comes to gender-based violence, the vast majority of perpetrators are men. So when we weren't including them, we were seeing great progress with the women and using their voice and advocating for themselves, but then we weren't seeing the reduction in actual cases of gender-based violence. And then when we actually started working with the men from the program and from the families of the program, we did see more significant and faster changes in regards to decreasing the rates of gender-based violence. Again, beyond just the men's engagement, we saw much more buy-in, participation, and advancements within the women and girls themselves. I think knowing that their husbands and their brothers and the men in their community were involved allowed them to feel quite a bit safer to fully invest in the program, knowing that there wouldn't maybe be retaliation when they went home for engaging in the program. They truly felt that they were doing something in partnership with the men in their life, and so there wasn't as much fear towards engaging in the program, which is something we had seen for years with our programs, is a desire among the girls and women to participate, but a fear of what happens if my husband finds out I'm in this program, like, will he be upset? So that really helped in that way as well. It really increased a sense of safety among the women and girls to advocate for themselves. I think it, increased their sense of agency to speak up for themselves and to take action in their own lives. And we really were able to see family-wide and community-wide transformation, where historically we'd seen more changes with the women themselves, maybe in their own lives, but we hadn't quite seen that ripple quite out to families and communities until we started working with whole families. Now this has completely transformed our approach at Serenina in a lasting way. Since seeing the results of the one, FIT project in one community, we have now made this our standard of practice. So now when we work with communities, we only work if we only move forward if we can engage whole families. So in every single one of our partner communities, which right now is 7 different rural communities in Guatemala, we are working with whole families. We do run our workshops with the girls and boys in the school, and then the men and women after school. We've also increased our therapeutic approaches and provision of therapy services in groups, couples, individuals, or families as well, having seen the impact of the work. And we're continuing to just deepen and grow the restorative justice aspects of our program. And I think a lot of times when people hear restorative justice, they think that's just, a potential perpetrator and victim coming together in a therapeutic session. But we want it to be a through line of all of our programs, and have compassion be a through line of all of our programs. So each workshop is kind of really built with that in mind as well. And really just continuing to see the men that are engaging with the programs as whole human beings that have their own life experience, that have possibly lived through their own traumas that have kind of shaped their behaviors and actions, and really trying to help them heal past wounds so they can move forward, exactly as Ray said, as the empathetic, caring, compassionate, nonviolent human beings that they desire to be and have the capacity to be. And there is, not a proven lack of empathy among men, but just socialized to behave in a certain way. And so really kind of being able to approach it from a place of compassion so that they can fully engage in the program and they can learn and grow in a way that is truly lasting, so that we can see these long-standing results, and just overall really see a safer and more equitable world for everyone, especially girls and women.
Thank you, Danielle. I think our audience has a lot to learn from you as well about, again, how the whole community was involved in your work, and just even having conversations about gender equality involving everybody and addressing root causes is so important, as you've done. Thank you for sharing. I do want to say, if anyone has any questions for Danielle and Ray, we will have a few minutes at the end for a brief question and answer period. So you can add your questions into the Q&A box at any time. And folks, while you're doing that, I'll ask Danielle and Ray one final question. So Ray, I'll start with you this time. Could you briefly summarize to you, what do you think the most impactful result of your innovation testing project was?
Thank you so much. It is very difficult to point at one thing as an impact for this work, because we saw some impact that was more direct and expected, and also some that was not expected. But I would just say that the first one that I would talk about is that in our Shona culture, being a man traditionally meant power. It meant silence. So men don't talk too much. Women are said that women talk too much. Men don't talk too much. Men have to be quiet. They don't have to cry. It meant control. It meant distance from the kitchen. It meant distance from children or childcare. It also meant some distance from emotional expression. But when men stepped into spaces traditionally seen as women's, it shook the foundations of these old beliefs. Suddenly, cooking wasn't a weakness, it was wisdom. Childcare wasn't shameful, it was fatherhood, redefined. And masculinity, it became something broader, more compassionate, and more community-centered, and more equitable. This was a cultural awakening. Men began publicly advocating for women's rights, not just behind closed doors, but on open platforms. And boys were learning and emulating, seeing men practicing cooking and doing it right there in front of everyone. Imagine a gathering of over 500 people coming to witness the Men Can Cook competition, and all these traditional knowledge bearers and all these wisdom bearers and the power holders cooking and celebrating success, with women coming to test the food and identify who had the most amazing recipe. That was transformational, not only to the men who participated, but to those that watched and to the young people that was watching this happening. It was true modeling. The other thing that came out, which I really was so happy about, is that men started mentoring other men, encouraging them that we are stronger when we stand with our wives and daughters. So this was a cultural shift. The other one, men started embracing caregiving roles. Childcare became a visible sign of transformation. Men who once saw child rearing as not their job were now changing diapers, walking kids to school, telling bedtime stories. This wasn't just cute, it was healing generations of emotional absence. Having a father in the house that is absent is what many children in my village, including myself, were experiencing. And through this project, we healed generations of emotional absence. Children felt more secure, mothers felt seen, families became connected. We also saw a reduction in domestic violence and increased harmony. With shared responsibility came reduced stress and fewer triggers for conflict. Households that were once battlefields became places for shared purpose. We heard a certain lady say, "We argue less now. He listens, we plan together." And from a man, I heard this: "I didn't know peace could feel this good." We also saw an expanded empathy, the joy on my face. This is something that I really, truly love. And like I said, I wish my father was alive to see and be also part of the Men Can Cook competition. There was expanded empathy from shame to solidarity. One of our most surprising lessons was how empathy expanded across gender lines. Many men had never been given space to process their own experiences, shame, fear, pressure. In these safe conversations, they didn't just understand women better, they started understanding themselves. And with that came action, cooking, caregiving, advocacy, not from a guilty perspective, but from a connection perspective. Then unexpectedly, we also saw changes in marriage dynamics. By confronting the idea that marriage is a service contract, find a wife, she'll cook for you. We saw young people delay marriages for the right reasons. Men no longer married for meals, they married for partnerships. And in that, love grew, not as a ritual, but as a lived practice. Men became visible advocates. This was perhaps the most powerful shift. Men who were once silent or resisted became vocal champions. They spoke up for women. They interpreted sexist jokes. They showed up to women's events, not as guards, but as allies. One young man told us, "Cooking helped me hear my mother for the first time." Cooking helped me hear my mother for the first time. So we learned this. Culture is not an enemy. It's the starting point. When we leaned in and truly listened to our cultural worldview, we didn't dismantle it, we reimagined it. We found hidden doorways to transform that outsiders might miss. So we transformed things that outsiders might miss. Men needed affirmation, not accusation. When we stopped treating men as problems and started treating them as potential partners, they showed up, full of compassion and consistently. We also learned that empathy is radical. And when it is practiced by men in communities where they were never expected to feel it, it becomes a disruptive force for good. Innovation. But here is what we learned. Innovation can be found in the ordinary. The kitchen, the cooking pot, the nursery became our laboratories for justice. And they worked because they were rooted in everyday life. And with that, I want to conclude by saying, when a man cooked and won a prize of a pot, all the prizes we gave for the men who succeeded were things that culturally were considered feminine objects: pots, plates, cups, knives. So when a man won a pot, he would gladly parade it and take it home. And any other person who don't believe in gender justice would ask, "You have got a nice, beautiful, shiny pot in your kitchen. Where did you get it?" Imagine a woman or a mother proudly smiling and saying, "It was won by Daddy at a cooking competition." Wow. That pot also became a symbol of healing, a symbol of the power of transformation when men and women work together. Those were some of the impacts. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Ray. And I'm seeing applause in the chat for you, rightfully so. I'm going to remind everyone as well, Ray's project was only 13 months, so it's really incredible everything that was achieved in that time frame. And Danielle's was quite short as well, so for both of these people. And Danielle, I'll throw the same question to you. Again, if folks have questions, you can add them into the chat. Danielle, could you share one key result that really struck you from your innovation testing?
Yes, I think, our main goal was to decrease the rates of gender-based violence. So I think if we're speaking about one key result, something we can really measure and quantify was the number of reported cases of gender-based violence within the target families dropped by 45% in 1 year. We only worked with them for technically 15 months. 3 months was reporting. So we couldn't have even hoped for a result like that. As I said, when we started working with whole families, when we started working with men, the rate of change excelled astronomically. And we were able to see really significant shifts, as described by Ray, in a much shorter amount of time by really engaging whole families and engaging whole communities and really working with everyone who impacts the lives of the girls. So we are incredibly proud and moved and inspired by the work done by this community and each of the families, each of the men, each of the women, to see the reported cases of violence drop by 45% in only 1 year. So yeah, that is probably one of the biggest outcomes that we've seen. And obviously there's so many others, and I think Ray described so beautifully. There's our main target, but then there's this ripple effect of positive impacts on the communities, such as, we also had women that were advocating for themselves and taking control of their own lives for the first time. 90% of women in the program took a concrete and action step towards their own empowerment. A number of them went back to school. A number of them started their own businesses. And a number of them were able to secure employment as a result of increased empowerment. We also saw much more women coming forward and seeking support for violence, whereas before they would have suffered in silence. So there were just so many positive results that we're incredibly proud of and moved by as well.
Amazing. That's so impressive given the context that you provided about Guatemala as well, that you were able to reduce those rates of sexual and gender-based violence in such a short amount of time, Danielle. So I really appreciate you sharing that today. Thank you so much. I'll do a last call if there's any audience questions in the chat, but I would like to just provide a little bit more information and start wrapping up our session today. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Danielle and Ray for sharing your experiences with us today, and to the audience for your participation. And thank you as well to the Compassionate Action Conference team for providing us with this space to share and learn today. And I'll add as well, if you enjoyed this session, you are more than welcome to join us on social media and sign up for our newsletter, which we will add in the chat, to stay updated on our future events and innovator stories. And we will add all of our social handles in the chat. And we invite you to share your thoughts with us on this session as well. So you'll see a QR code on the screen. It's a very short survey, but you're welcome to complete it to share your thoughts. You can scan the code by using your phone camera, focusing on the code, and a hyperlink to the survey should appear for you to click, or you can click the link in the chat. And we kindly ask that you fill it out and share your feedback with us. Perhaps I'm seeing some questions come in. We did start a little late, so I can take one or two and then let you complete the survey as we're wrapping up. So one question I'm seeing here is how we were talking about the short timeline that you had for your testing projects. This person is asking, how were you able to engage families with any potential time constraints that they had with gender roles within their household and with the timeline of the project? So maybe, Danielle, I'll throw this to you first.
Great. So the timeline was absolutely one of the challenges that we faced. So what we really noticed is connecting with the different groups and really understanding the scheduling needs that they had. That was really predominant with the men. As I said, we did have low engagement at the start of the program with men, and I think a lot of that was due to kind of the topics, but also logistically, a lot of the men in our communities would work in the agricultural sector in a community 2 to 3 hours away. So they'd get on the bus at 4 a.m. every single day, 6 days a week. and they wouldn't get back till 8 p.m. So having them attend workshops was really challenging. So we had to really make it work for them. And what we ended up doing was shifting from weekly workshops to monthly Sunday dinners, that they would cook dinner. It's kind of interesting hearing Ray talk. One of the pieces we had was we did have the men prepare their own meals, so they weren't being served by women. And then also offering food as an incentive was really helpful for the workshops as well. We did that for all workshops with the women as well. Offering childcare was one of the gender responsive initiatives that we did as well, which wasn't originally in the plan, but thankfully FIT is an organization that really supports pivoting and learning as we go. So we did begin offering childcare so that the women could fully engage working around market days. A lot of the women would go to market, so we couldn't schedule workshops on those days, and really taking their lead on the frequency of the workshops and the scheduling of the workshops was really important. We were running the program in COVID and post COVID. So that brought along a lot of challenges, but one of the small supports was that it was unfortunate, but it did make organizing easier, was that people were more available because the school wasn't running and the church wasn't running as many activities and things like that. So we did have a bit more flexibility with their schedules in that way.
Great. Thanks for sharing those accessibility and accommodation measures, Danielle. And we'll end with one final question and then wrap up. So this is for Ray. Ray, I'm curious if the women in the program felt threatened when it started, and can you share if the men feel different now after participating in the program?
Thank you so much. The answer is yes and no. Yes, in that the obviously gender issues would be conversations that women would be very scared and weary about, because they know that traditionally most NGOs or organizations trying to address these issues would target them, give them a lot of knowledge, they take it home and they get punished. And it was also scary in the sense that you're trying to speak into culture, which is kind of hard because this is something that has existed for generations. But the no part I was referring to is that we do had three things going on at the same time to our advantage as SCORE Against Poverty. The first thing is that SCORE Against Poverty is a local-based organization. So this is an organization that is known in this community, and it is from that community, and people can relate, and the people know each other's cultures, including the staff members that are there. So there was a lot of legitimacy in the sense that people were talking of a culture that they all understand and know, and they were navigating cultural systems and structures that are known. Second thing is that we had two gender specialists. One was male and the other one was female. This was extremely important because men were able to interact with the male gender specialist without feeling scared, and women could interact with the female gender specialist without feeling scared. And these two gender specialists made sure that they created safe spaces for each group, so that the groups, for men's groups, people feel very safe, and for female groups, people are very safe. And they also brought a lot of assurance or reassurance when people were diving into very sensitive issues. They would assure them that they would handle them in a confidential manner or in ways that cannot bring any hatred. Now, the other side of this question was the feelings after participating. I would say that if you come to Menezi district right now, I'm very sure that all the wards, the wards in the area, even though the project was in a few wards, there was a lot of spontaneous adoption. There's a strong sense of pride by men. You see men putting on aprons at events whenever there's a burial, maybe there's a funeral, or there's a community gathering. You will definitely see men who come in aprons ready to cook. What we found interesting was that women went as far as even sewing the aprons for their husbands as a sign of pride and support and joy. So for those men, it has been life-changing and transforming and transforming, because it has increased harmony in the family, it has increased their relationship with children has improved, income in the family has also improved as they are now working together, planning together, and doing things together at the household level. So there are a lot of gender champions, some that were trained by the program, some that spontaneously took over the responsibility to do it. But all to say, we really wish we were able to amplify this work, because clearly there is a very, very big room for expansion, as men feel very proud of the good work that they've started in reshaping, not throwing away their culture.
Absolutely. Thank you for responding to that, Ray. And folks, I think we'll close the session here. I just want to thank Ray and Danielle again for sharing about all of their incredible work, and just to remind everybody about, as they've exemplified, the importance of compassion when we're working with men, boys, and people of all genders in gender initiatives. So thank you again, Danielle and Ray. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.